Hey page turners, and welcome to the very first discussion of our very first selection of our book club, which is And Then She Was Gone by Lyczղղł. So we're going to be discussing parts 1 and 2 of the book, chapters 1 through 26, and then I will let you know at the end of this video what you're going to be reading next. So I know a lot of you guys have went ahead and read the whole book. That's completely fine. You don't have to just stay in order with us. I do plan on reading forward, probably finishing it by the next video, but we're only going to be discussing what the parts that we were assigned to in this video. And then I would just ask that for those of you who have read ahead and know the ending or have read it previously, don't spoil the surprise for others. Don't give too much away, and only discuss, if you don't mind, discuss in these chapters, discuss in this video, the comments and the posts on Facebook in our group, what is discussed and what has went on through chapters 1 through 26, part 1 and 2. That way we can all keep kind of at the same place, even though some of us have read forward. If you're joining me for the very first time for the book club and you don't know, we have a group over on Facebook and it is called Turn the Page, and you're more than welcome to jump over there and join the discussion. It's been going really well, and I am so pleased with how many people have wanted to join, and I think it's beginning to pick up pace. I know I haven't been super involved as of late, but there has been a lot of people that have been very active and discussing the book, and I hope that just continues to increase as we go along. And I am very thrilled that you guys want to do a book club with me. Love reading, and I know a lot of you guys love it too. So what we're going to be discussing is parts 1 and 2 of Then She Was Gone by Lyczղł, and that is chapters 1 through 26. So the very first thing that I noticed about the book, for those of you who have a physical copy of the book, let me know if this is something that you've noticed too. The pages stick together very easily, and there have been several times I've been reading along and it's jumped, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, and I've had to go back and like literally pull the pages apart to figure out where I'm at because I've skipped a page because they stick together. So is anybody else having that issue? For those of you who bought a physical copy of the book, you can let me know that. So like I had mentioned in the previous video that I had discussed which book that we were going to read, this book was set in the UK, and that's the very first thing that jumped out to me. There's a lot of UK references. There's a lot of words that I wasn't familiar with, mostly slang words. And it's not so much so that you can't understand it, but it's just the little words that they throw in of things that you just have to stop and think. It's kind of like you know what they mean in a broad sense, but I've used Google to let me know what they mean. And you can tell a lot of the things that they talk about, and like they take the tube instead of like a train or a bus. A lot of the things that there was a scene where Laurel and Floyd were going to have champagne, and Floyd's daughter was joining them, and it was customary to let children drink a little bit of champagne in different countries, and that's pretty much frowned upon here in the United States. So there's just little subtle differences that take place in the book because Lyczղł is from the UK, and I don't know about any of her other novels, but this one does take place in the UK. Another thing that I liked about the book is that in the very beginning, the first few chapters, it alternated back and forth between telling the story from Laurel's point of view and then from Ellie's point of view. Now, we all know and it's not giving anything away from just reading the synopsis of the book, that Ellie has disappeared and that she is thought to be deceased. So it's kind of telling the backstory of where Ellie was at right before she disappeared, and then as she was disappearing, and then it jumps back to Laurel, and then it just goes all to Laurel's point of view. That actually reminded me a lot of a book that I just got done reading called What We Forgot to Bury, and that's by Maren Montgomery. That entire book jumps back and forth chapter to chapter from two of the main characters' points of view. So it's really good to I like books like that. And actually one of the very first books that I fell in love with years and years ago, it was actually a Oprah Book Club book, and it was called Fall to Your Knees by Anne Marie MacDonald. That is also a novel that takes place from different characters' points of view. And it just goes to show you how one story has so many points of view, and I've often heard it said that there is her side, his side, and then the truth. And this kind of plays on that, where there's one plot, there's one thing going on, but everybody that is involved sees things from a different perspective, and it could be a totally different story depending on whose side of the story that you're listening to or that you're reading. All right, so in the first two parts of the book, we're introduced to quite a few characters, and I'm just going to run through those characters and give you a brief description of each character. So if you're not following along and reading the book with us, and you still want to watch these videos and kind of find out what the book is about, you won't be kind of lost and not know who we're talking about. So I'm going to go chapter by chapter and fill you in on who is who as the story progresses. So first of all, you have Ellie, and she is pretty much the main character, even though she has disappeared and is deceased now. The story revolves around her. So you have Ellie, and her name is Ellie Mack. Then you have her boyfriend, who she was seeing right before she disappeared, and his name is Theo Goodman. They were high school sweethearts. Of course, Ellie disappeared right before she was set to graduate from high school. Then, of course, you have Ellie's family. So after we've kind of gotten introduced to Ellie and Theo in the prologue and kind of the first chapter, we meet Laurel, and that, of course, is Ellie's mother, and her name is Ellie Mack. And then, of course, her husband, which is Jake. It wasn't long after Ellie disappeared that they separated, and then they divorced. Jake moved on, and he has a new significant other named Bonnie, and they live together. Then Laurel and Jake had two other children, and Ellie's two other siblings, and that was Jake and Hannah. Jake is an adult, of course, now. They are all adults now because the years have went on. And Jake has a significant other as well, and her name is Blue. And then Hannah is the only one that does not have a significant other, but Hannah does receive flowers in the second part of the book from a mysterious person by the name of T. So we aren't really sure who T is yet, but we do know that there is a T in Hannah's life, and that we're kind of assuming that maybe T might be a significant other. We don't know yet. Then we're introduced to Ellie's tutor, and she becomes a point of interest of someone that maybe has some suspicion of what's happened to Ellie, and then she has some really kind of weird ties to the family of the man that Laurel meets later on. So her name is Noelle Donnelly, and she is a tutor. She is a math tutor. She tutors Ellie for a while until Ellie kind of gets these bad vibes, and she tells her mother that she just doesn't want to tutor anymore with her. Then you're introduced to another family, and that is the family of Laurel's love interest, and that would be Floyd Dunn. Floyd came in kind of mysteriously, and he is the father of two daughters, and his daughter's name is Sarah Jade Virtue, as well as Poppy Donnelly. And you will see a coincidence between Noelle Donnelly and Poppy Donnelly, and we'll get into that more in a little bit. There's also a few references to a Kate Virtue, and that would be Sarah Jade's mother, although we really don't see her as of yet play into the story. We just hear her mentioned in the book. So those are the list of the characters as of the first two chapters that we've been introduced to, and there's also a few other ones like a waiter and a hairstylist and a couple police officers, but those are the main characters that I discussed. So Ellie seems like a typical teenager. She is very eager to finish school, and she is excited about spending her summer, maybe starting some adventures. This is her very last summer as a free teenager before she starts university, as they call it, instead of college. And she's wanting her boyfriend to go on these adventures with her. She wants to do all these crazy things and enjoy her life, although sadly enough, she doesn't get the chance to. It's pointed out very quickly that Ellie is her mother's favorite. She's referred to as her mother's soulmate, as her best friend. And there's kind of a rift in tension between Hannah and Ellie. And I got the idea that it was because Laurel favored Ellie over Hannah. There's a point in the story when, after Ellie had went missing, that Laurel wishes that it had been Hannah that went missing instead of Ellie. Now, I'm not a mother, and I don't know that if that is something that would be something that mother would think. I don't think that it is right, but it may be justifiable in the moment of grief, wishing that your daughter didn't disappear. Although I can't imagine wishing one of my daughters would disappear over the other. But I'm not a parent, so I don't know, how that would be. There's really not much talk of Jake in the book. He is referenced a few times, but other than some family gathering that they had, you really don't hear much about him, or we really don't understand much of who he is as a person. Maybe further on in the book we will learn more about him. Laurel has been so distraught over the disappearance of her daughter that her life pretty much just ended when her daughter disappeared. And I think that's understandable. As I said, I'm not a parent, so I don't know how that would feel, but I can only imagine what it would be like to lose a child, and not just lose the child, not know where they are and what happened to them. So Laurel spends a lot of years just going through the motions of her life. Her and her husband stopped getting along. They eventually split, and Laurel doesn't seem to move on like her husband did. Her husband eventually moved on and found someone else, and his life just kept going. And I don't think it kept going because he didn't care. I think maybe because it's the motherly thing, a mother dynamic maybe. I don't know if it's easier for a man to kind of not put things behind them, but it might be a motherly instinct kind of thing for it to be harder for someone to move on when it's the mother and daughter. So Laurel just goes through the motions for many years. She moves out of the house eventually. She sells the house after her husband moves out, and then she moves into a smaller place, but she still has many of the same routines as she had. She just goes through the motions, but she's not really living life or enjoying life. So as the story goes on, there comes a point in time where the detective and the police officer call Laurel and her ex-husband in because there has been some items found, and then eventually some remains have been found, and they proved to be those of Ellie. Now, there was a strange occurrence that had happened a few years after Ellie had disappeared, where there was a break-in in their old house. And Laurel still thinks to the current day of the book that it was Ellie that broke into the house, but it still can't. There were things missing that only Ellie would like the cake on the bar that her sister had made because it was Ellie's favorite. There was a set of candlesticks that were taken. She knew that they weren't one of her mother's favorites, but she knew that they were worth some money, that she could get some money out of them. There was just these little things that Laurel thought that it was Ellie that had broke into the house, and she said she just got the feeling that her daughter had been there. So that really hasn't been able to be put together of how Ellie got to the house, or where she was, if it was her, where she was for all that time before her remains were found. So after the remains were found and Ellie's family were able to kind of get some closure and she was able to move on a little bit, she was able to have a funeral, and that kind of freed Laurel, knowing that her daughter was at rest. It didn't make her feel any better because she still missed her daughter, but there was that unknown had been solved, and she knew that it was closure. And so that's when she meets Floyd right after that. And a lot of people were saying that they kind of got the creepies from Floyd. I really didn't pick up on any creepies. I mean, he probably is too good to be true, and it just so happened she met him the day after she got her hair done and she was stepping out and trying to restart her life again. That is a little odd. But I really didn't get any kind of creepies from Floyd right away. It wasn't until the book progresses and you meet Floyd's children, and that would be Sarah Jade as well as Poppy. And Poppy is the one that has a strong resemblance to Ellie. And Poppy is a very peculiar child. She seems to be very intelligent beyond her years, and she seems to be kind of precocious, I think would be a word. She's not like other children her age. She dresses differently, she speaks differently, she doesn't have the same views of the world that most children her age have. In fact, she has a lot of the same views on the world as Ellie had. So my suspicions of Floyd and the whole situation didn't come up until there was a time when Floyd and Laurel were going to have dinner together, and Sarah Jade was going to babysit Poppy. And that kind of fell through. Sarah Jade had some other plans, and Floyd was going to have to cancel unless it would be okay if he brought Poppy along. And Laurel said that was fine, to go ahead and bring her along. And then the part where it really got me, and it was like very suspicious to me, is Floyd asked Laurel to hide the pictures of Ellie and from Poppy, because Poppy was very inquisitive and asked a lot of questions. Poppy already knew, I'm pretty sure at that point, that Laurel had had another child and that she had passed away. So I'm not quite sure. It kind of made me wonder, why did Floyd want her to hide the pictures of Ellie from Poppy? After that, it kind of got more creepy when we found out that Poppy's mother was Noelle Donnelly, the tutor of Ellie when she was in high school, her math tutor. And then we realized that Laurel had no idea that Ellie did not like Noelle. She thought she had just reached the point of not needing a tutor anymore and was ready to move on. And then Hannah confirms that Ellie did not like Noelle. She found her creepy. And then Laurel confirmed this when she went back and she pulled out a box of Ellie's things and was reading through her diaries, and it was written in her diaries that she just wasn't comfortable with Noelle. So Floyd gets very clingy very fast. He says that he's getting to the point where he can't live without her, and that he hasn't said the L word, but he said she's in her heart and he misses her all the time. And that kind of set off alarms for me too, because that happened quite quickly. And I think Laurel was kind of taken in by this because she hadn't had anyone in her life for so very long, and somebody was paying attention to her and was making her feel good, and she was just kind of swept away until these little things started adding up to her, and then she got a little bit suspicious. So the other part of the story that I find a little bit odd, and I can't wait to see what develops from it, is the relationship between Hannah and her mother Laurel. The relationship is strained at best. I think Laurel has always held a resentment, like in the first few chapters when Laurel said that she had wished it had been Hannah that disappeared instead of Ellie. I think Hannah could feel that and felt the separation and her not kind of caring about them as much as she should have. So the relationship is strained. Hannah spent a lot of her time working. Very seldom was she at home. She had an apartment of her own. They call it a flat. And there was very little, there was no pets, there was no plants, it was very drab. Laurel cleaned her daughter's apartment every week, and she could tell when she started not being home. So she suspected that maybe there was somebody in her life. Then she asked her to go out and have dinner with her for their birthdays, a family dinner. They had come to the point where she was going to invite Floyd. Her ex-husband was going to bring his new significant other. Their children were going to bring, Jake was going to bring his significant other. And it was going to be a birthday celebration for Laurel and Hannah, who were born in the same month, same week. So Hannah told her mother that she couldn't do it on her birthday because she had plans to go out with her friends for drinks. And then Laurel saw a bouquet of flowers on Hannah's counter, and the card, there was an inscription on the card, and it was signed from T. So we've yet to find out who T is. So Laurel's mother, Laurel, is thinking that this T person is a significant other. And that reminds me, my little misstep there, Laurel's mother is a character in the book, although she isn't a very significant character. She is in a rest home. She has dementia and is very frail and is not expected to live very long. It was actually her mother that encouraged her to contact Floyd after he gave her number. And after that first visit, after she told her mother that she was happy and that things were going well between her and Floyd, and that she thanked her for encouraging her to make that phone call, Laurel's mother had said that she felt like it was her time to go because she was now happy, and she was just holding on all this time because she was worried about Laurel. A lot of groundwork being laid and a lot of webs interweaving, of characters interweaving, the connection between Noelle and Floyd and Poppy looking like Ellie and Poppy being Noelle's daughter. I'm getting all these suspicions, and I'm going to tell you my suspicion right now, so if you don't want to hear my suspicion, you can go ahead and mute this or not listen and just give me about like 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can go ahead and start listening again. So as far as chapter 26, that's as far as I've gotten, my suspicion is that Noelle wanted a child, and I think my suspicion is that Ellie was pregnant with Theo's child, and Noelle abducted her and kept her until the baby was born, and then played off that Ellie's baby was Noelle's, and then she killed Ellie. That's my theory. There is another place in the book where Sarah J. confides in Laurel that she had seen Noelle in the 8th month of her pregnancy. She had seen her in her father's bedroom, and she had no baby bump. So that kind of, all those things combined led me to think that Noelle was never pregnant, and this Poppy is now Ellie's child, which would be Laurel's granddaughter. That's my suspicion as of now. Okay, now you can start listening again. Listen. Make a little gesture there. I'll put a little annotation. You can start listening if you don't want to hear my suspicions. That's what I think as of now. Maybe that will change in the coming chapters. I don't know. But that's where we're at now for the first 2 parts. So for next week, we're going to read part 3 and 4, and the chapters will be down here. And then we'll jump on over to Facebook, and I'll have some questions. We can discuss it. If you guys want to discuss it here, you're more than welcome to do so as well. And let me know what you think of the book so far. Is it something that you would pick for yourself if I hadn't suggested it, or is it something that you would have passed on? Or let me know what you think so far. I will see you guys again next week for parts 3 and 4 of Then She Was Gone by Lisa Joel. See you guys soon.